I saw spirits, I had spirits, ghosts, I heard voices. I could take my spirit ahead in time and look at things. When, like, for example, this isn't one I talk about a lot, before I get to the near-death experience. I'm in my living room, which this living room thing seems to really be a powerful place for me. Die, 36, breast cancer. And then I saw my mom walking by and oh, you'll miss your mom. Here's another story that I don't know if I've ever shared it on a podcast, because I'm feeling with you that our theme is, if you track your spiritual experiences over time, and you can see them as part of your blueprint and how you're put in place and with contact with people for a reason. So I'm going to give you another example. I don't think I've ever shared this story.
My guest today is Margot McKinnon, who had some extremely unusual communications from her spirit team when she was little. They even told her what her profession was going to be. And then later, she had 2 near-death experiences. And to say that I am excited to talk to Margot today would be a complete understatement. But Margot, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Lori. It's just such a pleasure to be here.
Oh, this is going to be so much fun. And I have to share with you why I'm so excited. About a year ago, I heard your near-death experience story, and I don't always know who my guests are going to be on any single day when I come on to do these interviews, because I do have an assistant who reaches out and books the guests. But if I have time in between my corporate job, I will go and listen to part of or some of the stories so I have an idea of how to introduce you. Margot, I got to tell you, I pushed the play button on the interview I found of you, and within 5 seconds, recognized your voice and knew immediately what your spirit guide had said to you when you were a little tiny girl about what your profession would be. I heard it in my mind. And I went, oh my gosh, I get to talk to her. I'm so excited today. So
I love it. Love that story.
Will you share that story with us? Because you were, I think, 4?
When I was 4, uh, when I was 4 years old, I had this little doll named Michael. And I loved my little dolls. And my parents were fantastic. Like, they had all the equipment that I liked, for playing and everything. So I had a little crib in the living room. And my parents were in the basement. They were watching TV with the rest of the family. And I came up to put Michael to bed. So it was dark in the living room. I'm 4 years old. I'm pulling the blanket up to tuck Michael into bed. And I heard, "You are to be a teacher." Just like that. And little 4-year-old Margot said, "Okay." And I have had opportunities to do other things that would probably be, I don't know, sexier, make more money, be bigger. But as a 4-year-old, I made that commitment to that voice. And I did exactly what it told me to do, which many people write to me or ask me, when they book a session or something, and they'll say, "Well, why do you think that voice shows up so strongly for you, Margot?" Because I listen. And I do what it says. So yes, I was a teacher for 25 years. And then I went on to, I left teaching, did my PhD, came back, and now I'm teaching this.
I love it. Oh my gosh. Okay. So one of the questions I always had about that story was that you named your little doll Michael. And I
Yes.
have always wondered if it was actually named after Archangel Michael.
I have also wondered that. His name was Michael. Yes.
Do you have any idea who that voice was?
You know, I've heard it sort of on and off in my life. However, since I've been really studying, when does that voice come in? How do I get it so that it comes in strongly for me, regularly for me? I'm actually beginning to think it might very well be God.
Why
And I
not?
was speaking at a children's and spirituality conference many years ago when I was in Oxford, and this very high level minister was listening to my story. And he was at the he was in the Canterbury Anglican Church, and he said, Margot, why do you think that voice is not God? And I said, because I'm little Margot McKinnon from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. That's why it can't be God. And he said, but the way that voice speaks to you is how God talks.
Maybe he'd heard it too.
I think he must have heard it too.
I love that. So you went on, you had some unusual experiences in childhood, but you had 2 near-death experiences. So you're already, in my mind, from just this short part of our conversation, awake because you're getting messages from spirit. And normally I ask people, what was your life like before you had the near-death experience? I don't think I need to ask that. What in the heck were these near-death experiences? You want to start with the one where you were 18 first, and then we can go deeper into that, and then we'll go to the one that when you were a little bit older?
Yes. Well, when you're a person, and I'm sure many of your viewers are, Lori, when you're a person who has regular spiritual experience, like I saw spirits, I had, spirits, ghosts, I heard voices, I could take my spirit ahead in time and look at things. And when, like, for example, this isn't one I talk about a lot before I get to the near-death experience. I'm in my living room, which this living room thing seems to really be a powerful place for me.
Maybe it was a
I'm in my
vortex.
living room and I hear die 36, breast cancer. And then I saw my mom walking by and oh, you'll miss your mom. So I always thought I was going to die of breast cancer when I was 36. And then my mom passed away when I was 36 of breast cancer. So I could hear things that were going to happen from that voice. And as a child, I didn't always understand. I didn't know how to put it together. And what I wanted to know in my adult life as I move forward was, how do I put these messages together? How do I hear it clearly? What's really happening? Who is this voice? How do I keep that voice really strong? How do I test the voice to make sure that it's the one that I'm supposed to be following? So I'm 18 years old. I'm at first year university, and I become very sick. And they put me they called it the infirmary, and it was in the basement of my dormitory. And they were waiting to ship me back home, which was a 2-hour drive. But they said, we can't move you right now because you're just too sick. So we're going to have a nurse looking after you. And she was like a student nurse. So she's in there talking to me, and she said, oh, there's this guy who I've just wanted to go out with him for so long, and he finally asked me out for Friday night and tomorrow night, and I said I can't go because I'm looking after you. Well, okay, girlfriend, I gotcha. You go on your date and I'll be fine here. There's a phone by my bed. And she said, really? Oh yeah. So she went off on her date. And I had a dream. And I was like so fevery that I couldn't even like get out of my bed, right? So I have this dream that I'm flying out towards this beautiful orange light. And then I think, oh, I can't leave now because I need to say goodbye to my roommate. So my spirit was coming out of the basement of the dormitory, and it was going up like the stairwell, and it got to the main floor landing, and all these girls were out there dressed in ball gowns. And so I went to a university that had lots of balls and everything. So they're all in their ball gowns. And so I was hovering on the ceiling. And I looked down, and one girl, she looked up at me like this, like, what am I looking at? And I did a somersault in the air. And I said, you've just seen your first ghost. And then I flew off up to the 4th floor where my roommate lived. I went through the door and she wasn't there. And I said, can't wait, gotta go. And then I just flew off, and somehow I came to, and I was like, I never know, like when I come to in those situations, like who I am or what I am, that I'm a human being. And anyway, I came to. And then this nurse came in, and flying in the door, and she said, I called you. I don't know how many times. It was many, many times. I called you so many times on the phone and you didn't pick up. And I said, well, she said, I thought you were dead. And I said, I think I was dead. And I said, were the girls going somewhere tonight in the dormitory? And she said, yes, they were going out to the military college ball, and they were waiting for their taxis to take them over to the military college. And I said, I saw them. I was on the ceiling and I was looking down at them. And she said, you can't even get out of your bed, let alone be. I said, I think my spirit was on the ceiling. And so that was my first one. And that one came in handy later on in my life. So to any of your viewers, anybody watching, keep track of these.
Like write them down so that they remember details?
Write them down in a book. Write down your dreams. Write down the voice. Any voices that come in, any kind of these experiences. So I didn't write it down when I was 18, but that's why I'm telling you. But it always stuck in my mind that this had happened, right? Later in life, I had a student that her eyes, the light had gone out of her eyes. And I do presentations for teachers, and I say that's one of the signals you need to see in your students. When the light goes out of their eyes, it means their spirit's gone. So you need to go in and help them. So with this one young girl, she would have been about 18, just ready to graduate. And I said, come and sit beside me after class, and you're not going to your next class. I'm going to phone your teacher. I have a prep period next. And I said, I said, I see you, and the light has gone out of your eyes. I see you. Tell me what it is. If I can help you, I'll help you. And if I don't know how, I'll find somebody who does. And it turned out her friend had been murdered. And her best friend, had called her on her cell phone in like 2 a.m. And she couldn't get to her cell phone, but it said unknown caller. And she thought, had she gotten to her phone, she could have saved her friend's life. And she was so rattled with guilt. And I said, well, you know what? When I was your age, I had a near-death experience. And the first person I wanted to say goodbye to was my best friend, who's still my best friend today, after all these years, was my best friend. Your friend was just on your cell phone to say goodbye on her way out. Take it as a beautiful honor that she wanted to connect with you on her way out. And I saw that student. We had coffee about 4 or 5 years ago. She found me on Facebook, and she said, that day, she burst into tears, and she said, you saved my life. And I said, how did I save your life? And she said, when you said to me, I see you.
What a powerful thing to say.
So that story, near-death experience, that's why I say write them down, Lori. Write them down, because that story was of benefit to somebody else decades later, when I was a teacher.
I love it. Oh my gosh.
So that was the first one.
I love so many parts about that. I'm curious, as you release her from her guilt, did you see the light come back into her eyes?
Oh, yes. Like she was taking my course for the second time because she didn't get a good enough mark to get into university. And when her light came back into her eyes, she scored on her provincial, I'm Canadian, so provincial standardized exam. She scored 98% on her final exams. And when I met her 4 or 5 years ago, she was doing her PhD. She was just starting her PhD. Um, so when your light is gone, it's very hard for you to perform down here. That's why our spirit, or the spirit part of ourself, is just so important to really honor that spirit. And if you see anybody with the light out of their eyes, I see you. I see you.
Wow. Oh my gosh,
Mhm.
who knows how many people you just helped. Well, the other part about it is the releasing from guilt. I think so many times people torture themselves because of what they think they should have, could have done in relation to somebody else deciding to leave. And I really and truly believe that nobody dies before their time. If it's not their time, they're gonna have a near-death experience and come back. So you released her in more than one way, not only giving her a beautiful message from your experience that it was her friend calling to tell her goodbye, but you released her from that guilt.
Exactly. And her friend wanted her released from that guilt.
I'm sure she did. Well, there
Mhm.
was no accident she was put in your path. So
Mhm.
I'm curious. We all lose people. We know when we're younger, people who are older than us are probably going to die before us. Our grandparents are going to die before us. Our parents are going to die before us. Yet here you are, a very young girl playing in the living room, and your mom walks by and you hear that message about the breast cancer, and you hear the message to honor your mom, or what was the what exactly?
I will miss my mom.
Miss your
Yeah.
mom.
Mhm.
Okay. So you're young and you hear this.
Mhm.
And does that somehow change how you interact with your mom from that moment on in your life?
Well, I thought it was me. So I didn't put any money away for my retirement, Lori, which was a big mistake because I thought I was going at 36. But anyway, um, no, I was with my mom. Like my mom, I was a teacher, so I would finish work June 30th. And I had 3 little kids. And my mom's birthday was July 17th. And I phoned my mom. She lived on the other side of the country. But I used to send my spirit over to help her,
Oh.
you
How would
see.
you send your spirit over to help her? What do you mean
Well,
by that?
I didn't know that I was doing this, okay?
Okay.
But I was doing this. This is how I've had to learn. I haven't actually had a teacher. I I have these experiences and then I get them verified for me. Anyway, so I felt badly because my mom had breast cancer and she lived on the other side of the country, which meant I couldn't go and visit her or sit by her or anything like, and she had it for 5 years. So I used to take my spirit out and then I would start cleaning her from the top and cleaning her out like this.
Oh.
And so then I the first time I ever did it, Mom called me that night and she said, "Were you here today?" And I said, "What did you see?" And she said, "I felt as if somebody had a paintbrush and they were painting all the cancer up." And then I
Oh
looked up,
my
you were standing
gosh.
by my bed. And she said, "And I knew it was you." So when my mom had cancer and then this 36, I was, I would have been 31 to 36 because she had that for 5 years. So I thought, well, I'm going to keep doing that. But then somebody told me that I didn't know what I was doing and this was wrong and all that. And I stopped. And I don't even know if I should be telling this story, but I stopped and her cancer all came back. And then that was the end. So, and I don't know if I can do it for everybody. I know I could do it for my mother,
But I
right?
think you
So,
were given an answer early on, which was that that magic age of 36, it was already, it sounds like, set. It wasn't an
I think it was
arbitrary,
set.
I know we have free will and I know things can change, but do you feel like maybe the reason that you were told that is because it was her time to go at that 36?
I think it was her time to go. She would have been 66. And, but I phoned her and I said, Mom, wait for your birthday. I'm coming for your birthday. Please don't leave before your birthday, which was July 17th. And I was finishing up June 30th. I just need a few days to organize the kids and then get the lawn mowed and everything, lock the house down and come out there. So I did that, and we just had all beautiful stories about her spiritual experience of what she was experiencing pre-transition. And her spirit was really pretty much already over there. Her body was just catching up, but she was waiting for me. So we had celebrated her birthday on July 17th, and then she passed on the 18th.
Oh my goodness. Do you mind sharing some of the things that she was experiencing, preparing if it's not too personal?
Well, she said, I'm hearing, it sounds like, and people laughing all, and just like a cocktail party around me. And I said, well, your spirit's already going over to meet the people who are waiting for you. And then she said she was sitting in her chair, and it was a lazy boy chair, so she could sit back like this a little bit. She said, I felt a poke like this. And I thought it was your dad, but that's a strange thing for your dad to do. But I opened my eyes, and there was a little woman standing there, all a beautiful, like she was radiating light, radiating white light. And she was standing there. And I thought, oh, she's my mother. She's all of our mother. She's coming to take me home. She's like our godmother.
Oh, interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
I'm
And I've
so glad
actually
you shared
heard that
that.
story. Other people have told me that story. I haven't shared mine. And I said, oh, my mom told me that too.
Wow.
So I thought that was very interesting too. But she wanted me there because she wanted to share her spiritual stories without kind of mind dominant people saying, oh, that's stupid, or, that's just your brain shutting down or whatever. These were very real spiritual experiences. But, and I don't want to cry, but I lost the lovely man in my life a month ago.
Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry.
I know, but it was just so interesting because I gave a tribute at his funeral, and he passed of a sudden heart attack on the Wednesday, March 12th. And on the Monday night, we went for dinner. And as we were ending the evening, because we didn't live together, he just lived up the road, and he said, I really don't know what our relationship is. I just know we deeply care about each other and we love each other. And I thought, isn't that the most beautiful thing in hindsight? And I thought maybe he knew, because a month earlier than that, he was saying, I don't like these eulogies that portray people as saints. I said, well, don't worry about it. I put that story in his tribute, So I thought, I wonder if he had inklings that he was going to be making a transition and he just wanted to tidy up some loose ends,
Yeah, I think the veil a lot of times for people can get thinner. So I'm curious, I'm going to ask you this. I know we have your other near-death experience to talk about too, but you're so connected, Margot. Have you gotten signs from him already?
Oh, he's been following me around here.
Yeah, not even surprised. I'm not even surprised.
I know, following me around, and we're heading into an election, and we used to really talk about politics and everything. So he's really missing that he's not down here listening to all the
He's like, can you vote for me?
I was going to put in at the end of my tribute, can you please vote for so-and-so? But I didn't, But here's another story that I don't know if I've ever shared it on a podcast, because I'm feeling with you that our theme is, if you track your spiritual experiences over time, and you can see them as part of your blueprint and how you're put in you're put in place and with contact with people for a reason. So I'm going to give you another example. I don't think I've ever shared this story. So anyway, my mom, she had a brother, and her brother was in World War II. But he was captured and killed at 21 years old, Canadian soldier. So he was killed quite immediately and everything. And it was right near the end of World War II. Anyway, he used to come and visit me. Well, he didn't visit me, actually, because I used to have this rule when I was like 17, 18, that if I had my door to my bedroom open about this wide, then all the spirits could come in and chat. But if my door were closed, they weren't allowed in, because, I might have an exam the next day and I need my rest. Or my room was too teenager messy and they weren't allowed in. So I used to tidy my room for them and everything if I were going to have the door open. But anyway, I had the door open a crack, and outside my room was the only one that faced this picture gallery of our family. And I used to see him in his military uniform looking at this picture gallery. So I would have been about 17. It was before I went to university. And I used to see him out there, and he used to stand out there and sort of with his hands behind his back, sort of with his legs spread, looking at these pictures. Okay, so now fast forward, I'm now in my early 50s. My brother sends me a newspaper article that they see that he's been written up in the local newspaper as haunting this military armory. And people see him, and and one man had said, "Oh, I've seen him before too." They always point to his picture. And my family was kind of a famous military family in that particular city, because my grandfather used to run the base, and this was his son, right? And they said, "Oh, this soldier probably never saw a day of service." And the pictures started flying off this picture gallery at the armory. And I thought, and they said, "Oh, he stands by the pictures, and he never comes into the room." Because the room they were working in was like the pub, like the mess hall. And he wouldn't come into the room. And I thought, that's so fascinating. He wouldn't come into my room either. And he stood by the picture gallery. And there he is standing by the picture gallery as written up in the newspaper. We also learned that he was planning on marrying this nurse who was also in World War II. And that he had bought her a ring and everything to propose after the war. Well, guess what? He died at 21, captured and killed. She survived. And while I was in Oxford, my dad got notice that she was moving into a assisted living home in my city. And he said, "Are you coming back to Calgary anytime soon?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll be there in 2 weeks. Could you go and visit her?" So I did, and I brought a beautiful bouquet of roses with a big ribbon and a vase and everything, right? And it'll make me cry. I'm a crier, Lori.
Me
I
too,
get
me
very
too.
emotional
So
about
sappy.
these stories. Anyway, but I think that's why the spirits talk to me too, because they know I can feel it, right? I'm a very sensitive person. So anyway, I came into the room with my big bouquet of roses, and I said, "My uncle would like you to have these." She told me their whole love story. She never married, never had kids. She only loved him. And she said, "I was damaged after the war, and I only love him." She was like in her 90s and just as bright telling me these stories. And then she held my hand, Lori, like this, and she said, "I never thought in all my life I would ever hold his flesh and blood again."
Oh, you're going to make me cry.
Isn't that a beautiful
Oh my
story? She
gosh.
passed soon
She's
after that.
90.
Yeah, she passed soon after that. I was back in England by then. I wonder if his spirit left too from the armory. I wonder if he's still, or whether he was just hovering about,
Oh,
waiting for her,
yeah.
you
Oh,
know?
did she know when you talked to her? Did she know that he had a ring and he was going to propose to her?
Well, and the thing is, I love my dad, but he's not quite as sensitive as I am. And he said, "Oh, I gave that ring to your brother." And I said, "Why didn't you give that to me? I would have given that to her.
Oh my
That would have been
gosh.
beautiful." But I didn't know that at the time
Yeah.
when I was talking to her. But nevertheless, she had her closure. And I thought, this is why I'm telling everybody here. I'm telling all of you here. Write these messages. You may not understand them for decades. And then you'll see, that's why. That's
Oh
why he
my
used to come
gosh.
to me when I was 17, because someday I'd live in the same city, and her name was Elsa. I'd live in the same city as Elsa.
And be able
And
to deliver a
tenants,
beautiful
and then
message.
I can go and hold her hand.
We are such kindred spirits in this way. So you probably don't know this, but the most popular video on my channel for several years was the one that I did about signs from my passed away loved one that died in 2012, who came to me. He came to me about 2 or 3 days with a song. He was the lead guitarist of the band Starship, and I got in the car and the screen was frozen and it said Jefferson Starship with your love, and no music was coming out, and I pushed all the buttons and I could go to any of the stations and all the songs would play behind it, but the screen was frozen no matter what I switched to. And I asked XM radio to reset my radio and they did, but it still stayed on the screen frozen despite turning my car on and off. And then when I got to my destination, one of my best friends who went to every concert that I saw Mark play in came out and she waved at the screen and she said, "Hi, Mark." And when I came out after our lunch, it was gone. And like you, I went and bought a notebook and I wrote that first sign down and I made it a practice. And it is a practice because we have busy lives. A lot of us have kids and all these other things, all these other activities are going on. But every time I would get a sign, I would, as soon after getting that sign as I could, I would write it down, because our minds will change things and how we remember them after years. And so you don't want to misremember. And falsely, we think this is so significant, I'm never going to forget it. But
Yeah.
you do, because other things happen, other signs happen. And even now, I got all these signs around. I lost my dog 2 months ago. She was one of my greatest loves on this planet. I had her for almost 16 years, and she was such a blessing in my life. And I didn't want to get a new puppy yet. I wanted to give myself time to heal and grieve and all these things. And all of a sudden, I'm looking for a puppy to get in the fall, and this puppy comes in, and I get these 5 signs around it, really significant signs to me. And I spent 2 days writing down. It took me so long to tell the whole story, but I documented every single word of it because of just what you said. It is so important. You have no idea when you're going to go back to something, when something's going to have another significance. And if you haven't documented it, you're just gone.
Totally gone. And every little detail, like I'm not a dreamer. I don't have like nighttime dreams very often that I remember anyway. But I had a dream, and I don't want to go into the whole dream because we have other things to talk about. But
Because we could
we
probably
can
talk
talk
for a
all
couple
day,
days.
Lori. So anyway, I had this dream when I turned 40 because I asked for a dream. I said, "Could you bring me a dream to show me my next decade?" So it brought me this dream. And it was so detailed, and I wrote down as many, and I thought, oh, that detail's not important. That, there's the basics. And then I'm in Oxford, and there I am standing in that dream. Like 10 years later, I'm standing there and I'm going, I'm in that dream that was given to me on my 40th birthday. I wish I had written down every last, like what the brick looked like, what the.
I got
So,
goosebumps when you said that.
Mhm.
Wow.
It's so true.
Before we move on to your next near-death experience, I want to ask you one more question that I thought of about that experience you had where you were floating on the ceiling and you looked down and you saw all the girls dressed in their formals getting ready to go to that military ball. And that one girl looked up and saw you and you did the somersault and said, "You've just seen your first ghost." I'm going to imagine, since you said that girl, that you didn't necessarily know who she was. Did you ever see her again after you were back in your body?
I looked for her, but you know what? I'm just wondering right now. Going the military ball, then I'm compelled to talk about my military uncle who went to that military college. Do you know what I mean? Like they're all connected, Lori. Like they're all
Yes.
webbed together.
Of course. So you didn't see
Mhm.
her again?
I looked for her, but I never saw her.
So interesting. I was curious because one of the things we're always looking for is evidential information. Obviously, this was a very real experience, and I have listened to enough of these to totally fully believe them. But it's also kind of cool when you get some little
I know.
evidential things on top of everything else.
Yes, especially when you're back again and people saw you. I mean, other people, if I send my spirit out, they see me there. It's like you can become a ghost now. You don't have to like actually pass over fully to the other side. But anyway, that's a whole other bigger
That's
story.
a whole other thing. Well,
Yeah.
you also had a second near-death experience when I think you were like 37.
Yes.
Want to share
And so
that
my
one?
mom had passed, and I was doing a ceremony actually, and it was a fasting ceremony. And I can't talk too much about the ceremony, but it was a 4-day fasting, no food, no water. So it's not like drug induced. It's like actually the opposite. You have to no food, no water, 4 days, because you go through the body hunger and you have to transcend that. Then you have to transcend the mind chatter that tells you to quit. And then it gets you into the spirit dimension, right? So, anyway, it was day 3 of this. And there's another part of this ceremony, which is, well, I don't want to, there's another part of the ceremony. And so, anyway, during that part, it was really, really hot, like 100 degrees outside. And then I guess I dropped, but I don't remember that. And by drop, went like this. And my spirit went immediately up. And it just went up to the most beautiful white light I've ever seen. Like it was so beautiful and so white. And it was like that, this what you hear in near-death experiences, right? This unconditional love. It was so magnificent that I was trying to open my eyes really big to see it. And then I thought, open your mouth so that I could become infused with this unconditional love. And then my mom came down. I could see other spirits going up, but they looked kind of like gray, like as if it were raining, this way, but only raining that way. Everything was going up. So I could see these other spirits going up. I could see my mom coming down like this. And then she said, my mom had this smile like this, like it was huge. And she said, "You can't come up any farther than this. This is as far as you can come." And she said, "You have to go back." And, it's the same thing you hear in other near-death experiences is you don't want to come back because why would you want to leave that beautiful place? So my spirit came back into my body, and then I was lying on the ground. And then I kind of looked like, what are these? Who, like, I didn't even know English. Like I didn't know words, or my spirit had to kind of reconnect. But it's always so weird for me because, I was kind of thinking, well, who am I? Like, where am I? And then I heard that voice say, "You're Margot McKinnon. You are a teacher." And that's what always grounds me back into who I am. Oh, yeah, right. I'm Margot McKinnon. I'm a teacher. Right. Okay. And that's my sole purpose in life. So my sole purpose always brings me back to life and it anchors me here. But you know what that experience taught me, because I like to integrate the experience into my life. So what did that experience teach me? I thought, well, now I know what absolute unconditional love feels like. I did go through quite a large period of time, because at the time I was going through a divorce and it wasn't very pretty. And so I I thought, wow, unconditional love. This world seemed overly, and I would say unnecessarily, harsh and abrasive, mean, hostile, competitive. And when you felt that unconditional love, you're going, we don't have to be like that as human beings. We don't. We've lost our way. And so I thought, I'm going to integrate unconditional love into my classroom, into myself. I'm going to treat everybody like that white light of unconditional love. I'm going to bring it into my classroom so that, I mean, I always did, but I didn't know what I was doing. But now it was much more like deliberate. I'm going to bring this unconditional love, white light energy into my classroom so that I can help, like the girl that I described earlier, bring that white light, unconditional love in my own children, my home, my friends, my circle. And so that's what I'm living that now. It's hard sometimes when you have to face somebody who's kind of mean or hostile or competitive to stay in that place. But the message I heard before we started, Lori, which I did not share with you before we got rolling here, was, and it's been telling me this for a while, but it was telling me to tell you this. And it just said, let the good win. Let the good win. Instead of people who cheat or lie and they get away with it, or, let the good win.
Wow.
And so we're in an election up here, and I was watching the different candidates, and there's one that I like. And I talked to God about it just before we got on, and I said, I heard, let the good win. And I said, yes, let the good win in this election that we're going to have. Please, please let the good win,
Yes. And I also think we are going through what is being called the Great Awakening.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the good part is that a lot of us, you just described the exact thing that I was shown on the other side that I'm doing as my purpose. You're a teacher, but your purpose in that last near-death experience and the lesson you learned was that you were to bring that white light and infuse that. I too, on the other side, was shown the exact same thing. My sole purpose is to take the love that we are. We're not here, we experience love. There, we're in a state of being of love, and I'm supposed to bring that in and I'm supposed to shoot it out. And somebody will see it and recognize it in themselves, whether it's conscious or subconsciously, and they will be reminded of the love that they are. And so that to me is bringing the good back into the world.
Yes. And I see it more like a circle, of unconditional love. And it's, if you want to come in, you're going to have to drop the competition, meanness, gossip, and everything if you want to experience this unconditional love. And, this is probably a good time to talk about my son when he was 3 years old. I don't know if you heard the story. So I'm tucking him into bed. He's 3 years old. And he said, Mom, before I was born, I was talking to God. And I said, really? What does, what does God look like? Is it man, woman, And he said, it's not really a person. It's like you're looking at white light, but it's God. Okay. And this is before I had my near-death experience. I said, okay. And he said, God told me I had to come down and be a human. I said, what did you say? I told him I didn't want to come. Why not? And he said, well, Mom, it is so nice over there. It is so nice. It's not so nice down here. And I said, so what did God say to that? And he said, well, God told me I had to come. So I said, can you show me your mom, my mom? And God showed me like a picture, like out of a photo album of you. And I said, oh, she looks mean and I don't want to be her son. I'm keeping my composure, my white light energy, Lori. And I said, oh, really? Well, what did God say to that? And he said, well, God told me I had to come down and be your son. So I got inside your body. Well, no, when God tells you to do something, you have to do it. And then I got inside your body, and then I was born. I looked at your face and I said, oh, you're beautiful, and I'm glad you're my mom. But the other part of that story is he was born dead because he was feet first and he had the cord wrapped around his neck and he was being hung all the way down.
He had an out in case he didn't thought you were mean.
Well, if he saw a picture of me thinking that my son had died during birth, I probably didn't look as nice as I would ordinarily.
No kidding.
And also all my vitals were going down and all of the machines were all buzzing. They were all trying to fix us both, right? But they had to resuscitate him. So I think he had that conversation. And I think he and I met in the in-between, you know, he could have decided not to come. And he's really quite he's 30, he'll be 33 this weekend actually. And he's just really a phenomenal person, like a very compassionate and in tune kind of person, but he knows that he was put down here to be a human. So
Does he remember that even now as an adult?
He says, I don't remember the conversation. He said, I do remember the photograph.
Wow.
And what's also interesting is that I put that story in my book, and this reader said, my 3-year-old just told me a story that God showed him a picture of me before he was born. But if you look at people's near-death experiences and they're going through their
life review,
it comes to them in pictures, right? In short videos.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think my son was given sort of a life review, almost blueprint picture of his mom.
I love that. Wow. I'm so glad you shared all of this. So one of the questions I love to ask after somebody's had these experiences is, did you gain any abilities that you didn't have before? You were already so connected to spirit. You were seeing spirit, you were hearing these voices, but was there anything that shifted after that last NDE that you didn't have before as an ability?
I would, when my students arrived on the first day of class, that voice would say, it's that one, it's that one, it's that one.
And those were the ones that you were meant to help the most?
Yeah, that were going to struggle this year.
Can you give us an example of maybe one story of one of those that they said that this is one of them?
Yes. I hope my students never watching this, probably not.
Well, we don't have any names. We're not saying we're not naming any names here.
Not naming any names. And if he heard it, he would agree that it changed his life. Anyway, he was okay. I know we're not supposed to say this, but he was a pest. We have 2 streams, and he was in the non-academic, and then we have the academic. He was in the non-academic, and you couldn't do anything if he were in the classroom. And he was there every day, like throwing paper balls, or he'd interrupt everything, or he'd have to get the whole class laughing. Well, anyway, I had said one day, does anybody know what an average IQ is? And he said, it must be 134, because that's what mine is. So it's 100, right? So here he is, this genius kid in my non-academic. Well, one day he came in and he was quiet. Like he didn't say anything. And this was wrong, but I enjoyed it for a day. Okay, so it was wrong. I should have asked what if there's some if I could, but I could just teach that day because he was, well, like behaving. Then the second day he came in, didn't say anything. Okay, let me just catch all the other kids up while I can. But then the third day he came in and he had dyed his hair all black and had all black clothes on. Okay, can't enjoy this anymore. The light has gone in his eyes. That's my rule. If I see a child and their light is out, then I have to. So anyway, and I have to be careful how much I can share on YouTube, but you know, he had there clearly he had done damage to himself also. So anyway, I said, stay after class. I have a prep period. I don't know how I always end up with a prep period that just butts right up onto when the kids are in trouble, right? So I said, you know, I used my, tell me what it is. If I can help you, I'll help you. And if I don't know how, I'll find somebody. Turned out he was kicked out of his family home because he was in a very toxic household. And he was kicked out because he was trying to defend his mother. And he was couch surfing. And he had some, and so we got talking, and I do have to be careful on YouTube that we don't get things, you know. So I said to him, go and write out your experience, whatever is happening to you. And he wrote the most beautiful poem. And about how he felt like he was being trapped in the weeds and they were sucking him down. And nobody could see him, that he was struggling. And I said, what's your greatest fear? My greatest fear is I'm going to turn out like my dad. And I'm going to become just like him. And I said, take this poem and I want you to take every line and turn it into the man you're becoming.
Oh, this is why you're a teacher.
Then he went back to his desk, and in about 15 minutes, he came back with this new poem. And he called it Empire. So about the man he was becoming. And I said, okay, I want you to keep this man you're becoming in your locker, in your jeans, by your bed, wherever. We got him social services. We got him safe and secure and all of that. But I said, you're going to stay with me for 3 years, grade 10, grade 11, grade 12, so that you have a contact person every day that is going to help you become the man that you want to be. And by the time he graduated, like I made him like he used to ask questions like, if there's really a God, why would God put me in this family? And I said, well, sometimes children are put there to be the parents. You know, they've got to pull their parents out and start a new story. And it's what we were talking about. Start that new story of unconditional love and healthy lifestyle. And if you show and let the good win, let him have a win so that his family can say, wow, look how great his life. What do we need to do to become more like him? And he said, you know, I said, well, you'll know because someday, because my spirit can look ahead, right? And I said, someday your dad's going to come to you and say, I see the man you've become. Will you help me become like that too? Makes me cry every time I think of him. And it, you know, I haven't taught since for a decade, 15 years, I think. And so anyway, he went on to university, got his business degree. And then one day I was packing up all my boxes to go to Oxford and leaving teaching. And who's at my door on my very last day? Him. And he said, it happened. My dad came to my door and asked, could I help him become a better man? So it was really, I gave him literature to read. I gave him The Alchemist, you know, the book, The Alchemist,
Yes.
looking at your soul purpose,
Yes.
and really guiding him through because, you know, he had a way better, he was born to be something in his life, as we all are. It's just sometimes you just need a hand to just pull you back onto your blueprint. I think you can get off your blueprint. You know,
I
I don't
love that you
think his
said that.
spirit, I
Just
don't
a
think his
hand.
spirit created an earth vision board that said, "Ooh, I want to get in a toxic family and have to go homeless." And, I don't think anybody's spirit came down here to do that. You can get knocked off your blueprint by people who are mean or toxic and competitive, and you can get knocked off. That's why what I like to do is make sure that your spirit is really strong and you have light in your eyes.
I think that you've given people watching so much of your wisdom in these nuggets. And you said something I've really never heard anybody talk about before, and that's the light, seeing that light in somebody's eyes or recognizing when the light has gone out of the eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So who knows what the ripple effect of that is?
I know exactly. Exactly.
Beautiful.
And if I can
Oh,
help you, I will. And if I can't, I'll find somebody who can.
beautiful. Well, I would imagine that people that are watching are going to want to reach out to you, to work with you, to read your book. So will you tell everybody where they can find you?
They can find me on my website, www.drmargotmckinnon.com.
That's right. You said you had a PhD.
Yes, Dr. Margot with a T, McKinnon.com. And I do lessons on this. So there's a kind of, I figured out over all my stories a step-by-step approach. I call it stilling the noise to hear the voice.
Wow.
And it's step by step. I show you how to do it. And the people who go through that, they're getting the vision, clarity about their next steps. They're starting to hear that voice. They're starting to see the photographs or little videos of what's coming for them and how to prepare, because I'm a really big believer on being ready for your next grander version of yourself coming in. Just like my student, there was a grander version, and he had 3 years of high school to get himself ready for that man that he was to become.
Wow. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Oh my gosh. I think I probably could sit here and talk to you for another couple of days. We probably have so many stories we could share.
Probably we could. We're quite in alignment, Lori.
I love this so much, and it just makes me so happy to be able to have a conversation with you and to be able to share it with people so they can find you. I am so grateful. Margot, thank you so much for what you are doing to help wake up the collective. It is so needed right now.
Thank you so much. Let's get the good to win.
I love it. I love it. And thank you everybody for watching. Next up, check out this playlist of other NDE interviews. Please like and subscribe. It really helps this channel to grow so I can bring you more content. Thank you for watching. I'm so glad you're here.